May 12, 1944, 340 nautical miles east of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The USS General W.P. Richardson rolls through a gray Atlantic swell, and below deck, in a converted cargo hold lit by dim bulbs caged in wire, Oberleutnant Friedrich Weber braces himself against the steel bulkhead. The air reeks of diesel fuel, salt, and unwashed bodies. Around him, packed shoulder to shoulder on tiered wooden bunks, sit 217 German prisoners of war, Luftwaffe pilots, Wehrmacht infantrymen, U-boat crews, all heading west across an ocean they once tried to control. Weber is 31. His Knight's Cross hangs somewhere in a box at a processing center in England. His uniform is still stained with North African dust from when British forces overran his panzer battalion outside Tunis 13 months ago. Since then, a camp in Algeria, another in Scotland, interrogations, delosing, medical inspections, and now this, a ship bound for a country he's never seen, carrying him farther from the war with every hour. He shifts his weight as the transport lurches, and a young corporal beside him, barely 19, captured in Italy, leans over a tin bucket and vomits. No one comments. They've been at sea for 9 days. Most of the men are beyond seasickness now, settled into a numb routine of twice daily rations, card games played with dog-eared decks, and whispered speculation about what waits for them in America. Do you think it's true? The corporal rasps, wiping his mouth. What the British guards said. Weber doesn't answer immediately. He knows what the boy is referring to. Rumor has circulated through the hold like a virus that American cities are untouched, that there are no ration cards, that prisoners are fed 3 meals a day. Weber had dismissed it as Allied propaganda, the kind of psychological tactic designed to break morale. He'd seen the newsreels in Berlin, American workers on strike, bread lines during the Depression, race riots. A nation of mongrels and profiteers, the ministry had called it, incapable of discipline, unwilling to sacrifice. But he'd also flown over France in E-42, seen the American bombers, wave after wave of them, more than seemed possible to produce. And he'd heard from friends in the Kriegsmarine about the convoys, hundreds of Liberty ships crossing the Atlantic, built faster than boats could sink them. We'll see soon enough, Weber says quietly. A whistle sounds from above. Footsteps clang on the metal stairs. An American MP descends, rifle slung across his back, clipboard in hand. He's young, clean-shaven, and his uniform looks freshly pressed despite 9 days at sea. Behind him comes another guard, carrying a steel pot of something that smells, impossibly, like coffee. "All right, listen up," the MP calls out in broken German, reading phonetically from a card. "We dock in Boston tomorrow morning. You'll be processed, then transported inland by train. Follow orders, no trouble, and you'll be treated according to the Geneva Convention." He pauses, glances at the clipboard, then adds in English, as if the words are meant more for himself, "Hell, you'll probably eat better than you ever did in the Wehrmacht." A few prisoners understand enough English to catch the remark. A ripple of confusion passes through the hold. Weber watches the guard's face. There's no malice in it, no mockery. Just a casual, almost bored statement of fact. And that, more than anything, unsettles him. The next morning, Weber stands on deck with the others, gripping the rail as the coastline of Massachusetts materializes through the mist. The first thing he sees is light, electric light, blazing from the harbor, even though it's barely dawn. No blackout curtains, no air raid sirens. The docks are crowded with cranes, trucks, ships unloading in organized chaos. Beyond the port, the city rises intact, church steeples, apartment buildings, factory smokestacks pumping white steam into the sky. No rubble, no bomb craters, no burned-out husks of buildings. Weber tightens his grip on the rail. Beside him, a Feldwebel who survived the Eastern Front stares at the skyline and whispers, almost to himself, "Mein Gott, it's all still standing." May 14, 1944, South Station, Boston, Massachusetts. They shuffle off the buses in columns of 4, boots scraping against pavement that isn't cratered, isn't patched with rubble and ash. Weber keeps his eyes forward, but his peripheral vision drinks in everything. The station's vaulted ceiling intact, glass panels unshattered, electric signs advertising departures to New York, Chicago, St. Louis. Civilians move through the terminal. Men in suits carrying briefcases. Women in dresses with actual color. Children eating candy from paper bags. No one looks starved. No one looks afraid. An American lieutenant with a megaphone directs them toward a waiting train. It's not a cattle car. Weber had expected cattle cars. That's how prisoners travel in wartime. But this is a passenger train. Pullman cars coupled together, each one painted in dull military olive, but still bearing the chrome fixtures and cushioned seats of civilian service. Guards position themselves at intervals, rifles held loosely, almost casually. One of them is chewing gum. Weber boards car 7 with 30 other officers. The seats are upholstered. There are reading lamps above each one, currently unlit but functional. Through the windows, he watches a vendor pushing a cart stacked with newspapers, coffee, sandwiches wrapped in waxed paper. An American sergeant buys 3 cups of coffee without producing a ration card. The train lurches forward, pulling away from the platform, and Boston begins to slide past the windows. Weber has seen cities. He was born in Stuttgart, trained in Berlin, fought through the outskirts of Stalingrad before his transfer to North Africa. He knows what cities looked like in 1944. Skeletal frameworks of bombed out apartment blocks, streets choked with debris, populations huddled in basements, waiting for the all clear. He knows the smell of burned plaster and cordite, the silence that follows a raid. But Boston is whole. The brownstone row houses lining the tracks have intact roofs, glass in their windows, laundry hanging on lines in tiny yards. A woman waters flowers in a window box. 2 boys kick a ball in an alley. The train passes a factory complex, 5 stories of brick, smokestacks active, trucks lined up at loading docks. Workers in overalls stand outside during a shift change, smoking cigarettes, laughing at something one of them said. They're not rationing tobacco, mutters Hauptmann Dieter Kohler, seated across from Weber. Kohler is Luftwaffe, shot down over the channel in 43. He points at the workers. Look at them. They're just standing there, wasting time. Weber says nothing, but he's thinking the same thing. In Germany, every factory runs on maximum efficiency, workers pushed to exhaustion, production quotas enforced by party officials. Here, these men are taking a break in the middle of the day, as if time and resources are infinite. The train picks up speed, leaving the city behind. The landscape opens into countryside, farmland, endless farmland, stretching to the horizon in every direction. Fields of green wheat, pastures dotted with cattle, orchards heavy with spring blossoms, farmhouses painted white, red barns with intact roofs, silos full of grain. No bomb craters, no scorched earth, no burned-out villages. A young Gefreiter, captured at Anzio, barely 20, presses his face to the window. "How big is this country?" he whispers. No one answers, because none of them know. The newsreels never showed this. The maps in the briefing rooms never conveyed the scale. The train rolls west for hours, and the farms don't stop. Occasionally they pass through a town, Main Street lined with shops, cars parked diagonally at the curb, movie theaters advertising the latest films, restaurants with neon signs. Every town looks prosperous. Every town looks untouched. At a water stop in upstate New York, the train idles beside a freight yard. Weber counts the boxcars on parallel tracks 40, 60, 80. He loses count. They stretch back farther than he can see, all marked with corporate logos. Union Pacific, Southern Railway, Baltimore, and Ohio. Another freight train passes in the opposite direction, and Weber glimpses its cargo through the slats. Tanks, artillery pieces, trucks stacked too high on flat cars, all heading east toward the coast, toward the ports, toward Europe. They're building this faster than we can destroy it, Kohler says quietly. He's staring at the freight train too. All those bombers we shot down over Germany, they're replacing them faster than we can count. Weber thinks of the production figures he'd heard whispered among officers in North Africa. Germany producing 25,000 aircraft per year. It had seemed like an impossible number, proof of German industrial supremacy. But watching this endless stream of American steel rolling past, he does the math differently now. How many factories does it take to fill these trains? How many shifts? How many workers who aren't starving, aren't conscripted, aren't being bombed every night? The train starts moving again. They cross into Pennsylvania as the sun sets, and Weber watches the landscape transform into something he wasn't prepared for: a valley filled with steel mills. Blast furnaces glow orange against the twilight, smokestacks breathing fire, entire complexes lit up like daylight. The factories run at night. They run without blackout curtains, without fear of air raids, without interruption. And suddenly, Weber understands something that makes his chest tighten. Germany has been at total war since 1939, every resource mobilized, every citizen sacrificing, every factory pushed to the breaking point. And America, this country that entered the war 2 years late, is out producing the Reich without even feeling the strain. We can't win this, someone whispers in the darkness of the rail car. No one disagrees. May 16, 1944, somewhere in rural Indiana. Weber wakes to sunlight streaming through the train window and the smell of food. Real food, not the watery soup or black bread that sustained him through the last year of captivity. An American cook moves down the aisle with a wheeled cart, distributing breakfast to the prisoners. Weber accepts his tray numbly and stares at its contents: scrambled eggs, 2 strips of bacon, white bread with butter, an orange, and coffee with real sugar. He hasn't seen an orange in 3 years. Around him, men eat in silence, not the ravenous, desperate silence of starvation, but the stunned quiet of cognitive dissonance. These are prisoners. They should be receiving minimum sustenance, the bare calories required by international law. Instead, Weber is holding more protein than a German frontline soldier receives in 3 days. Gefreiter Klaus Becker, the young soldier from Anzio, holds up his bacon, studying it in the morning light like an artifact from another civilization. "My brother is in the 6th Army," he says softly. "In Russia. He wrote that they're eating grass soup. That men are dying from hunger in the trenches." He sets the bacon down, can't bring himself to eat it. "Eat," Weber tells him. His voice is firm officer's instinct. "Starving yourself won't feed your brother." Becker obeys, but his hands shake. The train continues west through Indiana, and the landscape becomes a catalogue of American excess. Highway 40 runs parallel to the tracks for miles, and Weber counts the civilian automobiles: Fords, Chevrolets, Packards, Studebakers, hundreds of them, all moving freely, all burning gasoline that isn't rationed or hoarded for military use. In Germany, civilian cars have been off the road since 1942, their fuel redirected to tanks and aircraft. Here, a farmer drives a pickup truck loaded with hay. A family sedan passes with children waving from the back window. A woman in a convertible, scarf streaming behind her, heading somewhere that isn't a bomb shelter. They pass through a town called Terre Haute just before noon. The train slows, and Weber gets his first close look at an American main street in daylight. A grocery store has its doors propped open, and through the entrance he can see shelves, actual shelves, stocked floor to ceiling. A woman exits, carrying 2 full paper bags, followed by a man with a crate of bottled milk. Across the street, a restaurant displays a menu board: Tuesday special, pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, apple pie 65 cents, pot roast, as a special, not as a luxury for party officials or military commanders, but as a Tuesday lunch for ordinary civilians. Hauptmann Kohler has stopped pretending indifference. He's pressed against the window like a child, and when he speaks, his voice is hollow. "I told my wife before I deployed that the sacrifices were necessary. That rationing was proof of our strength, our discipline, that the British and Americans were soft, that they'd crumble when the war got hard." He pauses. "I told her their economy would collapse under the strain." Weber watches a delivery truck unload crates at the grocery store. Coca-Cola, the labels say, hundreds of bottles for a town of maybe 15,000 people. "You weren't lying?" Weber says. "You were repeating what we were all told. We were told a fairy tale," Kohler replies, "and we believed it." The train crosses the Wabash River and enters Illinois. The farms here are mechanized on a scale that seems impossible. Tractors pulling plows across fields that stretch for miles, combines harvesting wheat, trucks hauling produce down paved rural roads. Weber thinks of German agriculture, horses pulling plows, because the tractors are at the front, old men and women working the fields, because the young men are dead in Russia, production falling year after year despite increasingly frantic directives from Berlin. He does the arithmetic in his head. If one American farm produces twice what a German farm produces, and America has 100 times more farms, the numbers don't work. Germany can't win by attrition. Germany can't win by outlasting the enemy. Germany is fighting a nation that treats war production as a side project, something accomplished without disrupting the flow of oranges and pot roast and Coca-Cola. At 3 p.m., the train stops for water at a junction in central Illinois. The prisoners are allowed off for 15 minutes, supervised by guards who seem more bored than vigilant. Weber stands on the platform, stretching his legs, and notices a new stand beside the station office. The vendor, an old man with wire-rimmed glasses, is reading a newspaper, and the headline is visible even from 30 feet away. Allied forces mass in England. Invasion expected soon. Beside it, smaller stories. War bond drive exceeds goal. Boeing increases bomber production. Rationing to ease on canned goods. Rationing to ease. While Germany tightens its belt another notch. While civilians in Berlin queue for hours for a loaf of sawdust bread, America is loosening restrictions. A guard notices Weber staring at the newsstand and walks over. He's a corporal, maybe 25, with an easy smile. "You read English, Lieutenant?" "Some," Weber admits. The corporal pulls a Hershey bar from his pocket, unwraps it, takes a bite. The smell of chocolate drifts across the platform. Real chocolate, not the ersatz garbage that passes for it in Germany. "Must be strange," the corporal says conversationally. "Coming here, seeing all this." Weber chooses his words carefully. "It is different than we were told."
"Yeah, I bet."
The corporal finishes his chocolate, crumples the wrapper, tosses it in a trash bin. "My cousins in the Pacific," says the Japs are the same way, shocked when they see how much stuff we got. They thought we were all starving during the Depression, that we'd roll over after Pearl Harbor. He shakes his head. Turns out attacking the country, with all the steel and oil and factories, wasn't their best idea. He says it without malice, just stating a fact. Then the whistle blows, and the corporal gestures toward the train. "Time to go, sir. We'll be in Missouri by nightfall. Camp Clarksdale by tomorrow." Weber boards the train again. He returns to his seat, and as Illinois rolls past the window, endless, prosperous, untouched, he thinks about the men still fighting in Normandy, in Italy, in Russia. Men who believe they're defending civilization against inferior enemies. Men who don't know that the war is already over, that it was over the moment Germany attacked a nation with 50 times its industrial capacity and none of its vulnerabilities. The train crosses the Mississippi River at sunset, and Weber watches the wide, dark water slip beneath them. Somewhere in the back of the car, someone is quietly weeping. No one asks why. May 17, 1944, Camp Clarksdale, Missouri. The camp appears through the morning haze like a mirage rows of white barracks arranged in neat grids, surrounded by double fences topped with wire, but no watchtowers with machine guns, no searchlights sweeping the perimeter. American flags hang limp in the humid air. Beyond the fence line, Weber can see farmland, a 2-lane highway, a grain elevator in the distance. This could be a military training facility, not a prison. The train hisses to a stop on a siding built specifically for prisoner transport. Weber and the others disembark, forming up in ranks as they've been trained to do since basic training. A U.S. Army captain stands waiting, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 sergeants who look more like administrators than guards. "Gentlemen," the captain says in accented but competent German, "welcome to Camp Clarksdale. You will be processed, assigned to barracks, and issued clothing and bedding. This facility houses approximately 800 prisoners. You will be treated in accordance with the Geneva Convention. You will work, you will be paid, and you will be fed. Any questions?" A Feldwebel near the front, older, perhaps 40, with the bearing of a career NCO, raises his hand. "What kind of work?" "Agricultural. Harvesting, processing, canning. The labor shortage is significant with so many American men overseas." The captain consults his clipboard. "You'll earn 80 cents per day in camp scrip, redeemable at the canteen. Any other questions? No one speaks. The concept of being paid for labor as a prisoner of war seems surreal. The concept of a canteen seems impossible. They're marched through the gate, and Weber catalogues everything. The medical building with a red cross painted on the roof, the recreation field with actual grass, and a volleyball net. The mess hall that smells like cooking meat. They pass a group of prisoners already resident, Wehrmacht infantry by their build and bearing, returning from morning work detail. These men are tanned, healthy, walking without the shuffling desperation of the starved. One of them calls out in German, "Welcome to paradise, boys!" Another laughs. The war's already over. You just don't know it yet. The new arrivals are led to a processing building where they surrender their remaining personal effects, receive medical examinations, and are issued new clothing, dye work shirts, trousers, underwear, socks, boots. Everything is clean. Everything fits reasonably well. A medic, German-American by his accent, checks Weber's teeth, listens to his lungs, notes his weight. "You're underweight," the medic says, making a notation. "About 15 pounds below healthy range. We'll fix that." Kitchen's running 3 full meals a day. Weber wants to laugh at the absurdity. He's a prisoner. His country is losing a war, and this American medic is concerned about his weight. By noon, they're settled into Barracks 14. The building is wood, frame construction, uninsulated but dry and structurally sound. Each man receives a cot with a mattress, thin but actual cotton batting, 2 blankets, a pillow, and a footlocker. Windows have screens to keep out insects. The floor is swept clean. "It's better than the barracks in Russia," Klaus Becker whispers, sitting on his cot as if afraid it might vanish. "Better than half the billets I had in France." At 1300 hours, they're marched to the mess hall for their first meal in camp. Weber enters and stops, causing a minor collision as the men behind him bump into his back. The smell hits first roasted meat, fresh bread, vegetables that aren't rotten or preserved in questionable brine. Then the visual. Serving stations staffed by prisoners wearing clean aprons, steam rising from metal trays, American cooks supervising but not restricting portions. The line moves forward, and Weber receives his tray automatically, his brain still processing what he's seeing. A ladle of beef stew with actual chunks of beef, 2 slices of white bread, a serving of green beans, canned peaches, coffee, milk. He sits at a long wooden table across from Cola, and neither of them speaks for 5 minutes. They simply eat, and the food is real, and there's enough of it to constitute a full meal by any standard, not just prisoner standards. Finally, Cola sets down his spoon and says, very quietly, "I've been in Luftwaffe service since 1936. I've eaten in officers' messes in Berlin, in Vienna, in Paris after we occupied it. This meal, this prisoner meal in rural Missouri, is better than what we served to pilots in France last year." An older prisoner, a stout-filled Weber with grey in his hair and ribbons from the First War on his tunic, overhears and nods. "I was at Verdun in 16. I know what losing looks like. I know what it feels like when your country is being bled dry." He gestures at his tray. "We're eating better than German civilians, better than German soldiers. They're feeding us excess, boys. They have so much excess that they can afford to fatten up enemy prisoners while their own men fight across an ocean." The table falls silent. Around them, 200 men eat their beef stew and contemplate the mathematics of empire. That afternoon, Weber is assigned to a work detail at a nearby canning facility. They're loaded into trucks, actual trucks, not forced marches, and driven 5 miles down a paved road to a sprawling industrial complex surrounded by farms. The facility processes vegetables, corn, beans, tomatoes, everything harvested from the endless Illinois and Missouri fields and preserved in tin cans for shipment to military and civilian market. Weber's detail is assigned to the loading dock. For 6 hours, they stack crates, operate forklifts under supervision, load pallets onto trucks. The work is physical but not punishing. There are water breaks. The guards smoke cigarettes and chat with each other, occasionally offering smokes to prisoners who ask. One guard is reading a paperback novel propped on a crate. No one is beaten. No one is screamed at. When a prisoner drops a crate and cans roll across the concrete, an American supervisor just sighs and says, Clean it up, Fritz, without ceremony. At 1700 hours, they return to camp. Dinner is fried chicken, mashed potatoes, corn, biscuits, and something called Jell-O that Weber has never seen before. After dinner, prisoners are free until lights out at 2200. Weber walks the grounds with Kohler, and they discover the recreation building pong tables, card games, a small library with German and English books, musical instruments available for checkout. They want us content, Kohler observes. Desil, they want us productive, Weber corrects. Happy workers are efficient workers. It's the same calculation we made with foreign labor, except they're actually following the Geneva rule. They pass the canteen and look through the window. Inside, prisoners are purchasing items with camp script cigarettes, candy bars, soap, writing paper, toiletries. One man is buying a harmonica. Another is selecting from a shelf of American magazines. My men in the squadron, Kohler says suddenly, the ones who didn't survive, the ones who went down over England or the Channel. They died believing we were fighting for survival, that the enemy was at the gates, that Germany would be destroyed if we didn't stop the Anglo-American plutocrats. He turns to Weber, and his eyes are wet. They died believing a lie. We were never the underdog. We were never fighting for survival. We started a war with half the world, and we did it because our leaders convinced us we were superior, that everyone else was weak and decadent. Weber has no answer. He thinks of his own men, the panzer crews who burned to death in North Africa, the infantry who held positions until they were overrun. Good men, brave men, dead for a lie. That night, lying on his cot in the darkness of Barracks 14, Weber listens to the sounds of 800 German prisoners settling into sleep. No one snores from malnutrition. No one cries out from nightmares, or rather, they do. But it's the manageable trauma of defeated soldiers, not the existential horror of the doomed. Through the window, he can see electric lights from the nearby town, glowing against the Missouri sky. No blackout, no bombers, no sirens. And somewhere across the Atlantic, the war continues. Men are dying in Normandy hedgerows, in Italian mountains, in Russian steppes, dying for a Reich that's already lost, fighting an enemy that has so much industrial might it can afford to feed its prisoners better than Germany feeds its heroes. Weber closes his eyes and tries to sleep, but all he can see is that train ride across America, the endless farms, the full stores, the highways crowded with cars, the factories running at night without fear. He finally understands what Corporal Becker's whispered question on the train really meant. How big is this country? The answer is simple and terrible, big enough to win, big enough that we never had a chance. June 6, 1944, Camp Clarksdale, Missouri. Weber is 20 minutes into his morning shift at the canning facility when the supervisor, a heavy-set man named Patterson, who fought in the First War and speaks functional German, calls for everyone to stop working. The conveyor belts slow to a halt. The clattering of cans ceases. Patterson climbs onto a wooden crate, and his face is grave. The invasion has started, he announces in English, then repeats it in broken German. Allied forces landed in France this morning. Normandy. It's on every radio station. For a moment, no one moves. 200 German prisoners stand frozen among the machinery and crates, processing the information. Then, slowly, men begin to react, some sinking onto crates, others turning away, a few openly weeping. Weber feels something in his chest collapse. Not surprise, but the final dissolution of hope he didn't realize he'd been carrying. Hauptmann Kohler stands beside him, staring at nothing. They'll never hold it, he says, but his voice is automatic, reciting doctrine. Rommel has prepared the Atlantic Wall. The panzers will drive them back into the sea. Weber doesn't reply. He's thinking about the freight trains he saw in New York, the endless convoys of tanks and artillery heading east. He's thinking about American industrial capacity, the capacity that feeds prisoners beef stew and produces so many bombers that shooting down 100 barely registers as a loss. Patterson climbs down from his crate and work resumes, but the atmosphere has changed. The guards are energized, talking in excited clusters during breaks, passing around newspapers with enormous headlines. The prisoners move mechanically, each man alone with his thoughts. That evening, the camp commandant, Colonel Whitmore, a thin man with a West Point ring, addresses the entire prisoner population in the assembly area. He stands on a raised platform with an interpreter beside him, and his voice carries across the formation. Gentlemen, as you've likely heard, Allied forces have established a beachhead in France. This invasion represents the opening of a second front that will lead to the liberation of Europe and the defeat of Nazi Germany. He pauses, letting the interpreter catch up. I tell you this not to gloat, but to be frank, the war is entering its final phase. Your nation will lose. The only question is how long it takes and how many more will die. He surveys the assembled prisoners, his expression more sad than triumphant. You have a choice in how you spend the remainder of this conflict. You can accept reality and make your time here productive, or you can cling to false hope and make yourselves miserable. I recommend the former. After dismissal, Weber walks to the fence line and stares west across the Missouri farmland. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere beyond that horizon, 3,000 miles away, men are dying on French beaches. German men, firing machine guns from bunkers until American artillery obliterates them. American men, charging through surf toward obstacles and mines. Klaus Becker approaches, hesitant. Oberleutnant, may I speak? Weber nods. My brother, Becker says quietly. The one in Russia. I haven't heard from him in 4 months. And now this invasion. Even if Germany somehow stops it, even if Rommel drives them back, he trails off, unable to complete the thought. Weber understands. Even if Germany wins in Normandy, which it won't, Russia is still grinding westward. American bombers are still turning German cities to ash. The production lines in Detroit and Pittsburgh are still running 24 hours a day. There is no scenario where Germany wins, only scenarios where the dying continues. Your brother is a soldier, Weber says finally. He'll do his duty, whatever comes. That's all any of us can do. It's a hollow answer, but it's the only one he has. The days that follow bring a steady stream of news, filtered through American radio broadcasts and newspapers, that the prisoners are now allowed to read in the recreation building. The Allies hold their beachhead. They push inland. The Wehrmacht counterattacks and is repulsed. More troops land. More supplies arrive. The arithmetic is inexorable, and the camp continues its routine. Prisoners work at the canning facility, at nearby farms, at maintenance projects. They're paid their 80 cents per day. They eat 3 meals. They play volleyball and ping pong. They write letters home through Red Cross channels, knowing most will never arrive because the German postal system is collapsing under bombardment. One evening in late June, Weber sits in the recreation building with a dozen other officers, listening to a contraband radio that someone has hidden in the barracks. They've tuned it to a German propaganda broadcast. Lord Haw, the English traitor who broadcasts Nazi talking points from Berlin. The invasion is contained, the cultured British voice announces. German forces have inflicted massive casualties and continue to hold the vital positions. The Atlantic Wall remains unbreached. The American and British troops are trapped in a pocket from which there is no escape. Kohler reaches over and switches off the radio. In the sudden silence, he says, I believe that once. All of it. The superiority of German arms, the weakness of our enemies, the certainty of final victory. He looks around at the other officers, and his voice is almost pleading. We all believed it. We weren't stupid. We weren't cowards. We were lied to by men who either believed their own propaganda or didn't care how many of us died proving it wrong. An Oberleutnant, a battalion commander captured in Tunisia, speaks up. He's 50, a career officer, old enough to remember the previous war. I was 17 in 1918. I remember what it felt like when the Kaiser's government finally admitted we'd lost. The shock, the anger, the sense of betrayal. He gestures at the walls, the camp, America beyond. This is worse. In 18, we lost because we were exhausted, blade white, starving. We lost honorably against roughly equal opponents. But this, he shakes his head. We picked a fight with a nation that could destroy us with its excess production. We invaded Russia with 3,000 tanks and thought it was enough. The Americans built 5,000 Sherman tanks last year alone, and they're not even the main producer. just one factory among dozens. Weber thinks about the Liberty ships, the freight trains, the highways full of civilian cars burning non-rationed gasoline. He thinks about prisoners eating beef, while German soldiers eat grass soup in Russian trenches. We were never going to win, he says aloud, and it feels like a confession. Not after 1941, maybe not even after 1939. We started a world war with a regional military, and we convinced ourselves that willpower and ideology would overcome material reality. The room falls silent. These are officers trained to believe in victory, in the superiority of German military doctrine, in the righteousness of their cause. But they've seen America now. They've ridden the trains through its untouched heartland. They've watched its casual abundance. They understand. Outside, the Missouri night is warm and filled with cricket song. The electric lights of the nearby town glow against the darkness. Somewhere in the camp, a prisoner is playing harmonica, an American folk song learned from the guards. And in France, in Italy, in Russia, in the skies over Germany, the war continues. Men who haven't taken the train across America still believe the newsreels, still trust the promises of final victory, still think one more offensive will turn the tide. Weber stands and walks out into the night. He crosses the compound to the fence and grips the wire, staring into the darkness of the American countryside. He thinks about the moment on the ship when he first saw Boston's intact skyline, the moment on the train when he counted the endless freight cars, the moment in the mess hall when he realized prisoners were eating better than soldiers. Each moment was a crack in the edifice of lies he'd been fed since 1933. Each revelation another piece of the truth. Germany wasn't strong, it was brittle. Germany wasn't superior, it was outmatched. Germany wasn't fighting for survival, it was bleeding for the ambitions of men who'd convinced millions that conquest was destiny. Behind him, the camp settles into its nightly rhythm. 2,800 German prisoners, safe and fed, waiting out a war that's already lost. And across the Atlantic, the Reich burns, its cities reduced to rubble by the very industrial might that ensures its prisoners never go hungry. Weber releases the fence and turns back toward the barracks. Tomorrow there will be another shift at the canning facility, another day of productive labor in service of the nation that defeated him. Another day of living proof that everything he'd been taught was a lie. He doesn't know when he'll go home, or what home will look like when the war finally ends. But he knows one thing with absolute certainty. He'll never again believe a leader who promises greatness through conquest, who claims enemies are weak, who insists ideology can overcome reality. That train ride across America taught him the only lesson that matters. Wars are won by nations with resources to spare, not nations burning their seed corn to fuel one more desperate offensive. And Germany ran out of seed corn the day it declared war on a country that could turn its factories to weapons and still have enough left over to make chocolate bars for prison guards. Thanks for watching WW2 Forgotten 45 channel. If you want more untold stories from World War II, like and subscribe and hit that bell. These heroes deserve to be remembered, and you help us keep their legacy alive. See you in the next one.